thank you all so much for coming out to the community conversation hosted by the Guam and CNMI Green Growth Initiative and the Northern Marianas College. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be interested in this issue and wanting to share information and hear information from our community. To kick off our opening remarks, I have a long-term DJ, avid gamer, and the president of the Proa tribe, Dr. Galvin De Leon Guerrero. Please give it up. Please give it a big round of applause.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, Cal. Yes, I've been a DJ longer than I've been anything else. Longer than I've been a filmmaker. Longer than I've been an educator. Longer than I've been a leader. I've been a DJ since 1988. So, yes, thank you. That's something to celebrate. And I was brought out of semi-retirement recently to DJ an event. I want to thank all of you for being here for basically another wonderful conversation that we're going to have tonight. I want to give a big thanks to our panelists, Sean, Jeff, and Lauren. Thank you so much for most of you flying a long way to get here. We really appreciate your presence here. Got to give a lot of love to Dr. Austin Shelton and the UOG Sea Grant team, as well as the Guam Green Growth Initiative. Let's give them a big round of applause. They have been incredible partners when it comes to environmental stewardship and sustainable regenerative practices throughout the Marianas and really throughout the world. And I was joking earlier that Austin is like Commissioner Gordon. When he flashes the bat sign, Batman's there. We're there. So very much appreciate their help. And I definitely want to give a lot of thanks to the NMC CREASE program led by Dean Patty Coleman and her team, as well as Kelsey, for putting this all together, helping with that. And with the CNMI Green Growth Initiative. I'm going to tell a story because that's the thing I do best. And it's a story of what happened a little over 7 years ago. It was the night that Super Typhoon Yutu struck the Northern Marianas. And I cannot forget that night because, we had done our best to board up our windows, to seal our doors, to pack the pantry, to really prepare, right? But I never experienced a storm that rough. And what I distinctly remember that night was the front door just banging, banging, and I wasn't sure if the door was going to hold. And at one point I went up and I tried to hold it and I realized that's just pointless. That's the one sound I kept hearing that night. And the other sound I kept hearing was my autistic daughter, who was about 6, 7 at the time. And she kept asking us, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? And in that moment, I felt incredibly helpless. I felt so helpless because I wanted to give her assurance because I could tell she was scared. I could tell she was confused. I could tell she needed her parents to protect her. And I felt like I couldn't because I myself was scared. So I had to swallow my fear, I had to swallow my uncertainty, and I had to just tell her, yes, my princess, we're going to be okay. Even though I felt like I was lying to her. It was at that moment that I resolved that I'm never going to ever feel that helpless ever again. Because, when we talk about these global events, global changes like climate change, it seems like it's so beyond our control. It seems like it's so beyond our sphere of influence. It's so beyond us. It makes us feel helpless. But I refuse to be helpless. I refuse to be helpless for my daughter. I refuse to be helpless for my family. And I refuse to be helpless for my community. And so that's why this conversation is so important. Because we need to stop feeling helpless. We need to stop feeling like things are beyond our control, things are beyond our sphere, things are beyond us. This is within our control. And I know the legal arguments, oh, this is beyond the EEZ, there's nothing we can do. Hell no, there's something we can do. We can speak up, we can say something, we can file public comments, we can learn as much as we can, and we may disagree, and that's fine. And that's one of the things we can do, is we can have healthy, rigorous, respectful debate. But whatever it is, we need to stop feeling helpless. We need to stop being helpless, and we need to embrace our own agency and say something and do something and be something. And that's what tonight is all about. That's what all of these listening sessions have been about. It's about making sure we empower our community, our people, to not feel helpless, but to give them that platform to have voice and to have agency. So I implore all of you to listen and learn, but I also beg you to step up, stand up, say something, and do something. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Dr. G, thank you so much. All right, everybody, I was asked if I was going to do WWE type intros, and I don't think I have that type of energy, but I'll try. So I would like to go over our housekeeping. Next slide, please. And our introduction. So right now, for housekeeping, I just want to let everybody know that we do have the press in the house. So everything that you will say, if you do stand up to comment or ask a question, will be recorded. I just want to let everybody know that. The other component of this is a dialogue that can sometimes get people fiery and heated up. So let's please be respectful. Let's make sure that we are listening, and let's make sure that we are treating this dialogue with the respect that we would want to treat our neighbors with. So just a friendly housekeeping reminder. And now for our introductions. We have a wonderful host of panelists here tonight. One walked all the way across the street from the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument. The superintendent of the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument, Dr. Sean McDuff. His origin stories are here in Saipan and was once at the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife section, Fisheries Research section, with the crowd right there in the back. Hi, guys. We also have Dr. Jeff Drazen out of the University of Hawaii, a man of the fish, and he has visited every continent with his wife after his PhD. And he now works at UH Manoa studying deep fish ecology. And then finally, last but not least, we have Lauren Sodella out of the Blue Nature Alliance. She flew all the way here from DC, so I think you win in terms of how bad your jet lag is. And so our wonderful panelists here will have a little bit of an overview of the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument. We will have a conversation about the environmental risks of deep sea mining. And then finally, Lauren will wrap it up with navigating the Federal Registrar and that process. Once we hear from our fantastic panelists, we will have an open Q&A. So that is a time for all of you to ask your questions. If you don't have any questions, well then I'll just start jumping in because I'm a very curious person. After that, we'll have our open floor. I think at this time we have 2 speakers. And then we'll have our closing remarks from the fantastic Dr. Austin Shelton to wrap it up and bring it home. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Sean McDuff.
I'm going to present from down here so you can have full view of the screen. So back in 2009, President, through proclamation, created one of 3 marine national monuments, and the Mariana Trench is the one that affects us. That's where I work. We're right across the street. So it protects, conserves unique and pristine habitats, historic objects, things that are of high scientific interest. It's a lot of words. It's pretty big. It's 95,216 square miles of submerged lands and waters. For the trench unit, which is the one closest to the RFI area, that's just submerged lands. For the 21 volcanoes, it wasn't me. It goes a laser. There's 21 underwater volcanoes. Catch my breath for a second. That's also submerged lands. And then for the island unit, which is 50 miles around the three northernmost islands, that's waters and submerged lands. So we have coordinated management here with CNMI through DLNR, NOAA, and my office, Fish and Wildlife Service. So this is straight from the proclamation. And, you know, we will not allow or permit any injury, destruction, removal of any monument features, right? So that's from the proclamation. So that's sort of my role, my job, is to make sure that that stays intact. So I'm just showing some, you know, relevant language from the proclamation. 2 years ago already, or a year and a half ago, we finalized our management plan. And again, there's some language in there again, kind of pertinent to our conversation, that anything happening outside of the monument boundaries is outside of the scope of the plan and my job. There's definitely coordination involved when working with other agencies and boundary issues, which mining is one. These are our management goals, pretty straightforward. Right, we're protecting marine ecosystems, providing for traditional cultural access, education and outreach. That's a big part of what we do. We want to promote exploration and research. You know, we like it when Dr. Drazen and his team come over and kind of poke around and learn new things, because then we learn new things and then we can share them with our communities. We also try and assess, promote compatible opportunities for tourism, economic ventures, recreation, and recovery of threatened and endangered species. Here's kind of like a 3D view of our archipelago here. The RFI area is going to be somewhere around here. And I'm going to be showing a bunch of images from this seamount. I don't know how to pronounce it in French. So all the images you're going to see are from this seamount, which is in the RFI area. So these are pictures of exactly where and what folks are looking at, what's at stake, what's at risk. And if you look at on Google Earth or maps or whatever, and you want to kind of figure out what's there, right? This is like the most basic image or most resolute image you're going to find, right? Some shape like this, and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. But that's all you see. You don't know what's under there, right? And if we had technology to help us get and look around, right, that would be great. And you know, I was able and lucky to be able to join an expedition that kind of did that. So that's what I'm going to be sharing. And this seamount is about the size of Oahu. So it's about 45 miles from here to here, and like 26 miles from here to here. So it's pretty large. That's a big surface. So all the images I'm going to be showing are from right at that dot. And again, this was through partnerships with Nautilus. They were out here last May. I think I see 5 people in this room that's been on the Nautilus. I see Amanda and Kyle back there. They're coming back this summer, so if there's opportunities for engagement and you want to know more about what they do, if you have ideas on what they can do, you should join those conversations and let them know your ideas. This is a summary slide from the Nautilus website of where we went. That white dot, sorry. This white dot is that Voigt seamount. All the red dots are AUV, so those are automated explorers. They preset coordinates and it just runs for 6-7 hours, and then you just get a bunch of video. So I'll show images from that, but then the majority are going to be from Voigt, the Voigt seamount. And so we started in Guam, we went south, and we did a big loop up over Euracus and then back. So it took about 21 days, and it's a pretty cool experience. So these are images from the AUV. I don't have access to their video, so these are the only images I found online. Most of the time they're seeing just sediments like this, but you know, sometimes they see things like this. And these are what they're interested in. And these are at about 15,000 feet deep, so it's pretty down there, 3.5 miles. And again, this is where the Nautilus went and the ROV went down. And so this tiny little spot, right? So right there, this track is the actual track of the Hercules, the ROV. And it's about a mile or a little less than a mile total distance in 7 hours. So that's kind of like what it did, where it looked. So there's still a lot of unseen, right? So I'm showing you a little sliver of what's, what their resources look like. It's a phenomenon. These are just pictures. So here's the Hercules, kind of looking at the ground. There's a bunch of scientists up on the ship, kind of telling the operator what to look at, what to pick up, what to sample, things like that. So you have some boulders, some sediment, some brown rocks, right? So this is what, and this was at 1,800 meters or like 6,000 feet deep. So this is what it looks like. There's a sample that was taken. So the robotic arm, can grab things. And that's one of the rocks. Again, this is the bottom. There's some shrimp swimming in the water column. Again, mixed boulder, rocks, sediment. There's a sponge and a fish. So there's things down there. It's not just rock and sediment. You look around, you look that way, you might see this, right? You got a lot of these things here, rock, sediments. Scale, so these dots are 10 centimeters apart, so about the width of your palm. So these are like, I would say like golf ball size rocks. See a sponge in the distance, a valley of rocks or nodules or boulders. Sea cucumbers that swim. I think this one like ran into the camera. It's right there. But, this is what the bottom looks like. So this is crustal material with stock organisms and Venus flytrap looking thing. Exactly, sounds straight out of a movie or something. And these are real images that we took that were taken. You have corals with brittle stars on them. Again, you can see crust material here, just things growing on top. Vast areas of sediment, rubble fields, fish cruising around. Just, examples of what grow down there. The sea star. And then we have biologists and geologists on board, and so they kind of like compete with each other for time. And geologists will say, "I like that rock." Let's spend 30 minutes trying to grab that rock. And so this is a rock that was sampled, and this rock was brought on board. I cut it in half on the ship, and I took my half, and it's in that bag.
What?
So we can see what that rock looks like.
And for $20, you can hold it.
Tammy's gonna auction off time of the rock. There's the rock on ship. Everything gets sampled, it gets numbered, labeled, tagged. And that's after we cut it. You can see the initial rock that everything deposited onto.
Oh, wow.
So if you look closely, it doesn't look this, it looks more black now. But you can still see the striations. And so, why do we collect these things, right? We're not just trying to own rocks, right? We just want to take it and share it with our community members so they could learn from it and know where it came from. Right, so it's an opportunity to learn and to teach. And I have some just more images of cool looking marine life and you know what that bottom area looks like. Right, so you can have a starfish on the stocked organisms, sediment, rock. I don't know what that is. There's that sea cucumber, sponge with the. There's a little shrimp in there that gets stuck. That's stuck. I think Amanda might know these pictures better than me. Coral with brittle stars on them. Another sea cucumber on this crustal material. Yeah, there's stuff, stuff lived down there. And when the ROV is descending and ascending, the camera's still on so we get to see what flashes in front of it. Most of the time it's just a long burning wait, just a lot of blue. Sometimes you see this. This was I think about 3,000 feet. This jelly kind of flashed around. And once the ship got to the surface, you started getting like amberjacks and other things that, like squid. So, like the surface water is out that far. You could still expect to find these types of organisms. I think that's my last
And that was my vacation.
All right, round of applause for Dr. Sean McDuff, sharing with us images from his time aboard the Nautilus as the resource monitor. I also think that Dr. Sean succinctly summed up the biggest beef in science, which is between biologists and geologists. So with that, thank you very much, and I would like to welcome Dr. Jeff Drazen from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, up to stage to talk a little bit more about deep sea fisheries ecology. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I was told that many of you may have seen the webinar where I spoke about deep sea mining, I think it was about a month ago. And so what I'm going to try to do here is give you an update on some results. I also understand a number of you have been in workshops and other things, and so you've gotten some of the basics of deep sea mining already. So what I'm going to do is share with you some updates on understanding the midwater plumes, because those directly relate to fisheries, which is an issue that a lot of you, I suspect, in this room care a great deal about. And then I'm also going to update you with some results on the interactions between deep sea mining and protected species, namely sharks and rays. So there's going to be two different things I'm going to try to cover here in the next 20 minutes or so. So I think we're all acquainted, and Sean just showed great images of some of the resource types that the mining companies are after. So on the left here, we have hydrothermal vents. These are the places where you have black smokers. These would be found to the west of your islands. And over thousands of years, they build up these massive sulfide deposits that have zinc and gold and silver and copper. They're actually not that much of an interest. People are not really probably going to mine these anytime soon, but they are one potential resource. What most of the mining companies are after are, on the right-hand side, these manganese or polymetallic nodules. They grow on the abyssal seafloor. They take millions of years to form. So the rock that Dr. McDuff has, that hopefully you'll all take a look at, the crust that's built up on that is millions of years old. But these form the potato-sized concretions. They're not really rocks, and they're 4,000 to 6,000 meters deep, and they have battery metals. Cobalt and nickel are the big ones that the mining companies are interested in. Seamount crusts, they're shallower than the abyssal plain, but they also, that's what actually Dr. McDuff has. This is a chunk of rock, like he showed you earlier, and that's a crust of cobalt, copper, manganese, nickel, iron that have built up on it over many millions of years. Okay, so the International Seabed Authority has already issued exploration licenses. They're not mining licenses. Companies can't mine, but they can explore for resources. And some of those licenses occur just outside of your exclusive economic zone. So here's the Mariana Trench right here, the islands are right over here, and this black line encloses a large area of the high seas that are managed by this international body, the ISA, or International Seabed Authority, and all of the red areas are exploration licenses for nodules, and the yellow are seamounts, where they have exploration licenses for crusts. So, as you might imagine, this explains why the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management has put out this request for information, because they are presuming that if companies have already found it worth exploring for these resources just outside of the EEZ, then if we just cross the boundary, this area here is what I was showing you, and this sliver right here is right here. So that's why there's the interest. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about and sort of update you on is some of the midwater environmental risks. And I'm hoping that I can get this video to play. I have to click on the screen here. Whoop. Okay. Sean already showed you amazing footage of the deep sea floor, so now I'm showing you video footage of midwater animals. These live in the water column above the seafloor, and the videos I'm showing you are from work we did in what's called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which is a manganese nodule province. We're looking at a whole host of gelatinous plankton. They're really beautiful that we observed with ROVs. That's a pelagic worm. That's a ctenophore, siphonophores, a host of real amazing animals. It's a very unique and different diversity than what you would see on the seafloor. That is a pelagic octopus. I know it's a little dark, the light's in here. That yellow thing right there is a clutch of eggs that it carries around with it until they hatch. That's a school of lightfish. They're bioluminescent. You can't see that in this video because we have the ROV lights on. And just another fish here, just hanging in the water column as we came up to it with the ROV. So that gives you a bit of idea of some of the animals that can live in deep mid waters. So this is a figure I think all of you have probably seen at this point. This sort of diagrams what a collector vehicle on the seafloor mining for nodules might look like. Here's one over here for seamount crusts, and they'll be connected by a riser pipe to a surface ship, and the ore will be brought up this pipe, but it will also be brought up with unwanted mud and seawater. And the company needs to discharge that material. They'll separate it from the ore that they want, and there'll be another pipe that will then carry the discharge of the unwanted materials back into the ocean and probably into the mid-waters. So if we just focus on the top portion of this figure right here and think about the potential impacts to the environment, there of course will be noise because the ore is going to come rattling up a metal pipe, and there may also be pumps or other types of lift devices to bring the ore up from the bottom. And this plume is going to contain mud and dissolved chemicals. They're going to discharge at a rate of about 50,000 cubic meters a day of muddy seawater for nodule mining. To give you an idea of what that means, a 20-foot shipping container that fits on the back of a truck or on some of our ships, that holds about 50 cubic meters. So it's about 1,000 shipping containers of muddy seawater a day being discharged into the water column. There will be dissolved chemicals. I'm going to show you some recent results on that. So there's metals that will be discharged. They're mining metals after all. It's not really surprising. We don't have a lot of tests of mining vehicles to really give you a good empirical estimate of how far these plumes travel. We have modeling studies because nobody's really done this to any great extent yet, right? So we haven't had that opportunity. The modeling suggests that these plumes, this figure is not the scale here, but they'll move away from the discharge point tens of kilometers, perhaps 40 or 50 kilometers away from the discharge point before things dilute back to background levels. They're only going to be a couple hundred meters thick. That's where, this is artistic license right here. So they think of them as a pancake, spreading out in a thin layer at a given depth, wherever they're discharged, over large distances, tens of kilometers, but not hundreds of miles probably. The interesting thing though, when you think about the water column, you have currents moving through the area. The discharge enters the water, and then it's carried downstream with the current. And as it does so, everything is going to dilute back to the background concentrations. But then new parcels of water will move in and be affected by the discharge point. Over the course of the year, the modeling suggests that between 3,000 and 15,000 cubic kilometers of seawater will be affected by the plume for some length of time. That's a big number. The median estimates are about 5,000 or 6,000 cubic kilometers of seawater. Lake Superior, biggest lake in North America, has a volume of 12,000 cubic kilometers. So they're talking about affecting something like the half the volume of Lake Superior over the course of the year. So we were able to study the mining test that was conducted in 2022 that had midwater discharge. It's the only collector test of its kind that has happened in recent decades. So it was a great opportunity to get some actual hands-on knowledge about what might happen with these kinds of midwater plumes. They discharged at 1,250 meters depth, and this is the mining vessel right there that they operated their collector vehicle off of. And this was a test. They had never used the vehicle before. So they had a number of tests over days where they didn't even lift nodules off the bottom. And then when they finally were, they weren't always discharging into the water. They're testing different components. This is not a complaint against the company or anything like that. It was engineering. They were developing something. But the point of me bringing this up is that it wasn't just a continuous discharge into the water column. They didn't make a plume for days and days on end. The longest period of discharge continuous was 36 hours. So they give us some idea of what could happen, but it's not like commercial scale mining. They were testing their gear. One of the things that we did is we used remotely operated vehicles, like Dr. McDuff showed you, and we drove into the discharge point and we tripped water bottles, we took water samples, and we analyzed the chemistry of the water in the plume that they had created. Farther away from the discharge pipe, so that would be right in close to here, farther away from the discharge pipe, we had another ship, as I showed you in that last slide, and we had a series of bottles in what's called a CTD Niskin bottle rosette. And we could lower those bottles in the water column and trip them at various depths throughout the plume and get samples of water that way. The figure on the right shows the concentrations of manganese. A lot of the nodules are manganese, so it's a great tracer to see what's happening with all the dissolved metals. And this is depth right along here. The background concentrations in seawater from this area are these little orange dots. And then the samples we took with the ROV close to this discharge point are the concentrations in yellow right here. And so you can see the concentrations of manganese close to the discharge point are quite high. And then the samples we took with the lowered bottles are the purple dots right in here. And so they're lower because they're farther away from the discharge point. So what you can see is that in the near field, within about 200 meters of the discharge point, the concentrations of manganese were between 16 and 860 times the natural background levels. And in the far field, between 1 and 375 times. This is not terribly concerning. Manganese is not toxic. This is a tracer. But there were metals that they discharged that are toxic. And here I'm showing you data for copper. And this is the background copper concentrations. This is what you see in that midwater discharge plume. In this large yellow bar right here, that is the range of the US EPA toxicity thresholds for copper discharge in coastal and fresh waters. So in the near field, right near the discharge point, the copper concentrations get up to above 6 times background and they cross this toxicity threshold. So they're likely toxic to animals. One of the things you may have noted in those figures that I showed you is there's a lot of dots strewn across the axis. There's lots of different values. Part of that is because I'm showing you just the data as a function of depth. But of course, we have samples that are really close to where they were discharging and then many hundreds of meters away. And so this is concentration of manganese, and this is horizontal distance from the discharge point. And you notice the really high concentrations right where they discharge it, but as it mixes with seawater, it dilutes and the concentrations get lower and lower. And by the time you're about 500 meters away, things are kind of back to back. So that's good news. Again, it's a very small experiment. Here, this is zooming in on this segment of data at about 160 meters away from the discharge point. And what you can see is that the concentration of manganese goes up. This right here is depth below the pipe. The discharge, or the concentration of manganese goes up and then it goes down. That's moving through this pancake-shaped plume. Concentration of manganese is really high right in the center of the plume, right over here, but it's low above and below. And this distance is between 5 and 35 meters below the discharge point. So it's not that great a depth. Think pancake, right? It's thin. So, you know, this at first is kind of nice to see because things are diluting at about 500 meters away from the discharge point and within tens of meters vertically in the water column. The issue is this is just a discharge plume that was created over 36 hours. Mining companies are going to operate probably 270 plus days a year nearly continuously. So the question becomes, what will cumulative impacts look like? And that's an answer that I can't give you because we haven't been able to study that yet. But over time, the concentrations of these kinds of metals could build. My colleagues also took samples of the effluent that was coming up, that was going to be discharged from the mining ship. They brought it back in the laboratory, they let all the mud settle out of it, and they just took the dissolved portion and they tested how toxic it was. They used a bunch of animals that the US EPA normally tests toxicity of industrial effluents with. So the first one is this guy. It's called a rotifer. This is not a deep sea animal, but the EPA uses this as a routine test animal. And my colleagues put these rotifers in samples of the effluent. All the samples are different because they were taken at different times during the testing. So they ran lots of different experiments, and they found that over 48 hours, the survival of these guys was reduced in 29% of the experiments that they conducted, different samples of this effluent. They then took larval fish, inland silversides, and they exposed them for 7 days to this effluent, and in 25% of their tests, their survival was affected. Lots more died than the control, and in half of the assays they ran, their growth was reduced. They looked at mysid shrimp and sheepshead minnow juveniles, so these are larger, older organisms than these guys here. And in 7 days, they found that they didn't die, but in 25% of the assays, their growth was reduced. The effluent is toxic in its most concentrated form. We did some studies using stable isotope tracers and things like that, and we wanted to know what the food web was like at the discharge depth where this test was occurring, at 1,250 meters. So I'm not going to bore you with all the stable isotope results, but for any of the scientists out there who want to know, please come and talk to me later. What we did is we wanted to look at this food web at this discharge depth. Now, in deep midwaters, there is a lot of organic marine snow. If you've ever seen video of the deep sea, you'll see all these little white flecks in the video. And those are little bits of mucus and zooplankton poop and all kinds of organic detritus, debris. When you get below the sunlit surface waters, that stuff becomes a really important food source. And what we found was that at the depth of this testing discharge, that 53% of all the plankton, these little guys, are in fact particle feeders. They eat this organic detritus. And we wanted to know then what fraction of all the small fishes and shrimps are actually eating that zooplankton. And the answer was 60% of the species and 85% of the total individuals, the density of micronecton, all the small fishes and shrimps and squids, eat zooplankton. So this is a tightly coupled food web. The problem is that when mining occurs and there's a discharge of all of that inorganic mud, there's no nutrition in that. That's just clay, bits of nodule or crust, and that's going to dilute the food resource for those zooplankton. And so this could break this food web down, and the importance is that these micronecton animals, these small fishes and shrimps and things, they vertically migrate. They move up and down, and that could translate the negative effects of that plume to other depths than the actual discharge depth, potentially leading all the way up to commercially harvested fishes, because there's a number of things like swordfish dive to 1,200 meters to feed, big eye tuna dive to 600 meters to feed, etc. These food webs are linked across the ocean depths. So, what are the potential environmental risks to midwaters from mining? Well, keep in mind, we don't have a lot of data, so actually pinning a number to some of the risks I'm going to give you, I can't say there's a 10% risk that this will happen. I can tell you there's a risk. We only have that one study thus far. We know considerably less about these midwater effects than we do seafloor effects from mining. Is there going to be the possibility of extinction of animals in the water column? Probably not. Animals there have generally large ranges. They don't live everywhere, and certainly when we get down, below the planned discharge depth, the company has now moved the discharge depth from 1,200 meters to 2,000 meters, based in part by some of the results that we have published. But once you get down into those depths, what we call the bathypelagic and the abyssopelagic, we don't really know what lives there. So that's a bit of a question mark. I have one paper on that. So the ecosystem services risks, this is what separates I think the sort of the seafloor risks and what happens on the seafloor compared to the midwaters is that in midwaters, there is a lot of risk potentially to fisheries. We know that tuna fisheries intersect with high seas mining areas. I know that there probably is not a lot of tuna fishing here in the CNMI, at a commercial scale in any case. But there's the potential for those industries to overlap. As I just mentioned to you, food web disruption is likely, and some of those food webs do support commercially harvested species. And this could be particularly evident on seamounts, where there are also fisheries for animals on the seafloor. And as I showed you with the copper, there is the potential for toxification of the seafood supply. If that copper actually makes its way into the food web, the question is, could it make it into the species we like to eat? And we don't know the answer to that. It is not unreasonable to think it could happen, but the likelihood of it is hard to pinpoint. And then finally, I didn't really talk about this, but a lot of those animals here, they vertically migrate up and down, and they can eat in surface waters. That's capturing carbon. And then when they move to depth during the day to avoid all their predators, they breathe, they respire. It's CO2. They poop. They're moving carbon from the surface layers of the ocean into the deep layers of the ocean. That is helping ameliorate the effects of climate change. And in some parts of the world ocean, this vertical migration of animals can constitute about 50% of the carbon flux out of the surface ocean. So if that is affected, that's something that needs to be considered. It has not yet been studied. Okay, so that's sort of some of the more latest results on midwater effects. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about another area of study that we've been engaged in. We wanted to look at the overlap of protected species like sharks and rays and deep sea mining. And so this is work that was really led by my graduate student, Aaron Juga, and he took a look at all the sharks and rays, ghost sharks, or sometimes called chimeras, like this guy, and he found that there were 30 species, not that many, there's about 1,200 total species worldwide, but about 30 of them live in areas on the high seas where companies are interested in mining. And he looked at the potential, we all looked at the potential for interactions with mining. This is a mining vehicle on a seamount, and while these very mobile animals will surely get out of the way of mining vehicles and will not directly die because of the mining, that mining has the potential to destroy some of the food abundance that these animals depend on. Animals that are living on the seafloor that aren't less abundant or aren't as mobile as the sharks and rays themselves, and so that may cause a decline in the habitat quality for those sharks and rays. In addition, we know from a number of studies around the world that some of these ghost sharks and some rays choose to lay their eggs on seamounts, and so mining could interrupt the life cycle of those animals. And then finally, in mid-water discharge, on seamounts, the discharge in the water column might be at the same depth as the seafloor effects. But in like nodule mining, the mining's down here and the mid-water discharge is up here. But in any case, if there is discharge in these mid-waters, it has the potential to interrupt the food resource for things like mantas, which dive to 600 meters, the oceanic mantas, and cause negative effects through food webs, as I've already talked about. So, of the 30 species that were identified as intersecting geographically with mining areas, 60% of them are already threatened with overfishing. So deep sea mining is an additional stressor that needs to be considered by agencies that are involved in the conservation of these animals. You might be asking, well, mining is deep, and not all of those 30 species probably go deep. So we looked at the depth distributions of those animals, and this is, each one of these little bars is the depth distribution of a species. All the species are down there. I'm sure you're not going to read the names, but every bar is a different species. And the gray area are the depths at which a discharge plume could occur, and the dark gray is where the benthic impacts, the likely depth of the benthic impact. So the top panel here is mining for nodules. It's all deep, around 4,000 or more meters, and none of the sharks or rays live that deep. It's actually interesting. There's a depth limit for sharks and rays. None of them live deeper than 4,000 meters. Other fishes live deeper, but that's another story for another time. So you can see that for nodule mining, the impact is the discharge plume. And then here for sulfides, those vents and the crusts, the impacts can be right on the seafloor. There's a number of species that actually probably live on the bottom where the mining could occur. So what you'll also see here is that, as I was saying, most sharks and rays don't live that deep. So one of the ways to mitigate the potential negative effects is to mine deeper and discharge deeper. If you can get the discharge and the mining deeper, you get out of the depth range of all of these animals. Okay, so that's a bit of an update on some results. There's lots more, but I'll just end with a few possible recommendations, things for all of you to think about as you're kind of considering whether or not this is an activity that you want in your backyard. And something to think about if you're trying to wonder about under what circumstances could it occur in your waters. So the first is, I think it would be great to have an answer on how likely it is that the release of these metals is going to toxify the seafood supply. And I think that that's not going to be done by going out and measuring metal concentrations in the animals, because nobody's mining right now. But we can use food web models, and we can come up with some good predictions about what could happen, and I think that needs to be done. Another one is that for the federal agencies that are going to be monitoring and regulating this activity, BOEM and NOAA, they should require that mining companies create environmental baselines, and those environmental baselines should include the water column, the mid-water. The other is to evaluate the overlap of protected species, this could extend to marine mammals, in the RFI area. How many live there? How many are likely to interact with mining should it occur in this region of the EEZ where mining has been suggested to occur? So, and then lastly, for nodule mining, at least, require the return of the discharge plume all the way back to the bottom. Make it really deep. Yes, it's an engineering challenge. It will cost money. But it seems so simple. If you're mining nodules, and you're already creating impacts on the seafloor, you already have a plume of mud from the vehicle driving across the bottom, why pick up a bunch of mud and discharge it in a second place? Put it back where you got it. Make a mess in one place, not in two. It just kind of seems like common sense to me. So that is some food for thought. I know all of you are thinking a lot about this and wondering how things should go down. I just want to end with a whole lot of thank yous to folks who invited me out here, both of the governors of Guam and CNMI, and to all the faculty here at the College of the Northern Marianas. Thank you all for hosting this event, and I'm happy to take any questions you guys may have, I guess, at the end. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Dr. Jeff Drazen for sharing his lab's prolific body of work and the updates as well that I know those of us who attended the webinar were really excited to see. Up next, I would like to introduce Lauren Swedell of the Blue Nature Alliance. She has been working pretty tirelessly since this RFI came out on November 12th to work with our local communities on engagement, policy updates, and really just help spread information. So with that, I would like to introduce Lauren. Big round of applause.
Thank you, Kelsey. Kelsey is right. Well, starting November 10th in the States, we found out that there was going to be an RFI for CNMI starting November 12th, stateside time. And I immediately texted Kelsey. It was in the middle of the night for everyone here in Saipan. And, you know, those of us in Washington, D.C., where I currently live and work, you know, we got on phones, we got on Zooms right away to talk about what's happening. You know, this process opened up in American Samoa earlier this year, and it's, you know, it's a new thing. We are all learning together, and it's just great to have this conversation back and forth between those of us who are, you know, scientists or policy experts, and talk to you all here who are frontline communities going to be directly impacted, and your voice matters. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm not sure how much time I have, but I promise I'll try to be quick. 10 minutes? Okay. Warning, I only have text, a few pictures, but nothing as exciting as guillotes or fancy graphs. So you're off the hook for a lecture, but hopefully I could try to make submitting a comment in the Federal Register as exciting as going to the bottom of the trench. We'll try. So, we talked about the announcement for the RFI for the EEZ within CNMI's waters. That was officially published on November 12th, stateside time. And that triggered a 30-day public comment period. And the BOEM extended the comment period on December 12th in response to a joint letter from the governors of Guam and CNMI, who asked for a 120-day extension. BOEM granted a 30-day extension for the comment period. And that makes the deadline January 12th, 11:59 Eastern Time. So I did some math. It's actually January 13 at 2:59 p.m. Chamorro Standard Time. So for all of us here in this time zone, Tuesday, 3 p.m., that is your deadline. But of course, the sooner, the better. So where's the RFI area? Jeff covered this already a little bit. It's east of the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument, the very monument that Sean manages quite expertly from across the parking lot. It touches the eastern edge of the US EEZ. It covers 3.5 million acres, and it's pretty deep. You all know the Marianas Trench is the deepest part of the ocean. And it includes abyssal plains, seamounts, and guillotes. which we all learned about earlier. There will be a quiz. Just kidding. So, what is the purpose of the RFI? The RFI is a request for information and interest. So, BOEM is obligated to put out this request to receive public feedback as well as feedback from the industry. So, yes, they're collecting industry interest, and they also want to find out geologic conditions, environmental impacts, cultural impacts, and existing ocean uses. And this is the first step of potentially 6. So request for information is way up there. And after all the comments are reviewed, the next step will be identification of the areas. So for American Samoa, who has already gone through the RFI process, they have announced the area to be considered for leasing on November 10th. And it's hard to say what is going to happen in terms of public engagement for the rest of the process, because we're just going through it for pretty much the first time. American Samoa is going through it first, and we are watching closely. So, why do public comments matter? I mentioned already that BOEM is required by law to consider public input during a federal decision making, and all of the comments become part of the public record. They'll use it to identify concerns, risks, and knowledge gaps, understand local and indigenous perspectives, assess environmental, cultural, and socioeconomic impacts. Sorry, I'll just catch my breath. And strong public participation does have the opportunity to influence what happens. And that could be, how they go through the next procedures on that steps from 1 to 6. Perhaps there needs to be more studies or safeguards or exclusions. And as we saw, the previous comments for requesting for more time, some of that extension time was granted. So people can definitely comment requesting for time, consultation, and analysis. But specifically for the communities here, even though you might not be a amazing deep sea scientist or a manager or a policy expert or a lawyer, you still live here and you have a unique experience just being here and having that be essentially your backyard, something that's been part of your life since, you've been on this island. So, BOEM has a very long list with a lot of jargon about what they are interested in accepting for comments, and I summed it up here. The column on the left is more about like the sciencey and environmental elements, and then on the right it's more social, cultural, and business. So again, they're looking for things related to the environment and biology, fisheries and ocean uses, geology and seabed conditions. So we learned about a lot of that just before I came onto the stage. But something that we did not share with you, that maybe you guys are the experts, is cultural and indigenous considerations. So what sort of cultural practices and ocean connections do you have? And maybe there's like important traditional areas like navigation routes that go over areas that are within the RFI. Anything that impacts communities and socioeconomics. So what happens here on Saipan or CNMI, Guam, you have things like the merchant marines, you have ports, you have the military, you have people coming in and out of the island. So you could consider how a potential vessel industry, or the deep sea mining vessels, like for instance, what if they come on shore and how would that impact the community? So you could talk about stuff like that. activities and operations. So perhaps you yourself are interested in exploring or testing or mining in the RFI. Perhaps you know of some types of surveys, equipments, and operational considerations, like Jeff mentioned earlier. Why would you put the discharge water like up in the higher water column if you're already disturbing the seabed? Why don't you put it down there? That's just an example. And also they are inviting industry to say that they are interested in a specific site. So that could go in, you could say something as well about specific sites, like this specific seamount is important for XYZ. The industry might say this seamount is important for mining ABC. So, are you with me still?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now, how to submit a comment. I did a lot of screenshots of the Federal Register website, and I will walk through the steps with you. Feel free to take out your phones and take some pictures of the steps along the way. But don't worry, we will have a QR code at the end of my segment that will lead you to this website so you can make your own comment. Okay, first and foremost, you have to get to the Federal Register website, and that is regulations.gov. So the banner will look like that, and in this little search bar, you will type in CNMI RFI. It should be the only thing that pops up. And so you will get the docket listing, and it should look like that. Remember how I searched for CNMI RFI? You'll see CNMI RFI all highlighted, and it will say the commercial leasing for outer continental shelf minerals offshore the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, request for information and interest. So you know you are in the right area. And so after you click that docket notice, you will click open for comments. Am I going too fast for those taking photos? Okay, great. And next you click on comments. So you open for comments and then you click on comment all the way over there. It says open for comments there too, so don't get confused. I did. I had to go back and forth several times. And that's why I did this for you. Okay, next, you write your comment in the text box right over here, or if you prefer to type up something as a PDF or a document, or handwrite something and take a photo of it, you could upload that file here by dragging and dropping or browsing on your computer. Okay, with me? Okay. Next, and this is another important part to consider. You are going to be asked if you would like to make your comment as an individual, an organization, or anonymous. I want to share with you that there is a possibility that if you make your comment anonymous, that it might not be considered. So, if you would like your comment to be definitely considered, you should sign up as an individual if you're writing as an individual, or if you're submitting a comment on behalf of your organization or agency, you would click organization instead. But if you're writing as an individual, you put your first name and last name, and your city, state, zip code, and US. You don't have to put your phone number, you don't have to put your email address, but you do have to put your first and last name and the basics of your mailing address. And all of this, once you hit submit comment at the bottom, it will be in the public record, and then BOEM will have to review your comment. Okay, pretty easy, right?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Someone's paying attention. Gold star. Okay. So something I do want to share as well is that how many of you have been tracking the American Samoa effort? Raise your hands. Okay. A few people in the room. Excellent. Some of you may have seen that there were a lot of petitions that were made and large sign-on letters to garner a lot of support. And so this is another reason why this public comment period is really important, as well as this process. I'm sorry if I'm going over time, Kelsey. Okay. So American Samoa's RFI received over 76,000 comments. So 76,443 comments. However, only 1,085 were unique. That's because 73,586 were associated with form letter campaigns, of which there were 27 of those. And then 1,772 were considered to be duplicates. So someone just copied and pasted and submitted it. So that means BOEM is really only counting 1,085 comments. And some of those were anonymous. So that reduces the considerations a bit. So something to keep in mind. And what is a unique comment? A unique comment is something that's not copy and pasted. It's not something where you just type your name into a petition, although it's not bad to put your name on a petition. You could totally put your name on a petition, but to have a unique comment that BOEM has to read that expresses your thoughts and concerns is you have to just do this whole process. And I think I have some slides that, okay, tips. Okay, sorry, tips. I'm almost done. So here's what to consider when writing your comments. Be clear and specific. So, if you are opposed for deep sea mining, or if you're in support of deep sea mining, it's not enough to say I oppose or I support. You should say why. I have these beliefs about deep sea mining. I have these thoughts. I have these convictions because blank. Being emotional is fine. Passion is totally fine, but clarity is where the comment will really carry a lot more weight. This room, this island, has a lot of local knowledge. So if there's something about your fishing practices or cultural practices or regional ecology that you know that someone like Jeff might not know, if you feel so called to put it in there as a reason to support your comment and your testimony, please feel free to do that. Also, things about food security and livelihoods, cultural heritage. And I mentioned earlier, you could ask for concrete actions in your comment. So that could be more studies, stronger safeguards, ways you would like to be consulted. Because again, this is the first step of the process, right? There's still more to happen if BOEM decides, let's define an area for consideration. So you have the opportunity to shape this, and they do have to review everything. And again, you do not have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a policy expert. You are important. Your voice and experience matters. And again, here is the QR code that you could use your phone to get the link for the Federal Register. And the due date for the assignment is 3 p.m. Tuesday, January 13th. Okay, class? That will be your quiz. And your comment will be on the Federal Register. So I'll be happy to take questions once we are at our Q&A panel. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I'll go ahead and invite our panelists to come up, and we will begin the Q&A portion of the evening. In the interest of time, because I don't want to be the person between you all and dinner, let's try to keep our questions concise, and we'll give ourselves 10 minutes for questions, so maybe one question per person. Does anybody want to kick it off? All right, Dean, making me get my steps in and my heels.
Hi, I'm Dean. I'm going to ask, I guess, 2 questions, but they should be short. To Sean, I'd like you to comment, since you're in charge of the monument, what do you think the impacts might be on the monument? Okay, and then for Dr. Drazen, it's more, you're obviously very knowledgeable. I just want to make sure you are commenting and sharing some of that on this RFI.
Thanks, Dean. So mining activities are not allowed within monument boundaries, but as Dr. Drazen mentioned, there's a chance of sedimentation kind of drifting over the monument, and we have to consider how that's going to impact the submerged lands there in the trench. We also think about that, trenches. We just saw all the images of, rocks and sediment, so we got to think about how adding more sediment to the bottom would impact that. So, once we get there, we're starting to discuss that more.
So for the RFI in American Samoa and the one here, there's a group of us scientists, and we put our heads together and we synthesized the body of knowledge that we thought was available for the areas identified in the RFIs, and so yes, we have submitted comments. They're very, very fact-based. They're not opinions. That's all of you. They're just, this is what we know.
Hi, this comment is from the University of Hawaii professor. What other countries, especially European countries, have looked into deep sea mining, and are these companies that are interested in pursuing these licenses, have they been kind of kicked out of other regions, like in the North Atlantic, and are trying to find that maybe it's easier to do things in the Pacific, or we're just richer in all these valuable minerals?
The Pacific is richer in all these metals, so the interest is in the Pacific. The biggest area of interest for nodules is the Clarion-Clipperton Zone between Hawaii and Central America, and there are currently 19 exploration licenses by various countries that have sponsored companies. Those countries, I can't recall the full list off the top of my head. United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, Germany, Norway, a bunch of European countries. But there also include Asian countries, Korea, Japan, China, Singapore, and they include Pacific Island nations, so Tonga, Nauru. So it's quite a breadth of countries. So the international countries that have licenses near here on the high seas, I think, include the Russian Federation and China, Korea, and Japan.
Have they done any seabed mining in the other oceans?
No seabed mining has occurred at a commercial scale to now. It is a developing industry. It has not taken off.
So I have a question, and my question is, the ocean is the least explored thing on this planet. Well, the Pacific Ocean, and it's the largest, right? So we're still exploring the ocean, and we know all these organisms serve a function, and we're just gonna we're gonna deep sea mine for batteries. Like, doesn't make sense in my mind. But I know that it will affect these ecosystems, and we don't even know the functions of the floating sea cucumber and all the stuff that are down there. They serve a function, and I feel like we need to figure out, like what the doctor said, we need more studies done in these areas before we trash it, because that's what we do as human beings. We are the only organisms on this planet that go in and modify and not go with nature. So, yeah.
All right, in the middle, I'm gonna try and get the mic to you, so we're just gonna pass it down.
I have a question. If there is less than 2,000 public comments, would the government just discard it since there's less amount of comments? And if there's anything else we can do to help our water solutions?
That's a really good question. The comments will not be discarded if there's less, but not having your voice captured means that it won't be considered. And if you feel or think or know anything about this region, I think it's a good idea to share it so your voice could be heard. It's a matter for the record. So if you, it's better to have your voice heard. It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you.
You're doing great.
For the duplicate comments, were the originals considered or not? Because what if someone copies your comment?
I don't know that granularity of detail, but I assume that they took the comments at least what they assume to be the first instance or the original. So that's what I would do if I was working there, but I'm not totally sure.
And then, can multiple people sign up if they're under like an organization, or like it's just one?
So to make a comment as an organization, that could include many people, but it will be captured as the organization's comment. If you want to submit multiple names, or if you want to have your comment and someone else's comment and have it all be different, then you would do an individual. But it's okay to do an organization comment if it's like an entity, a business, an agency, a group. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And then my last question is, does deep sea mining increase like seismic activity, like earthquakes? Okay.
No, we don't expect that one.
Thank you.
All right, I see the question in the back, and then, did you have a question up front? Okay, question up front, and then Ian, and then we'll finish off back here. Okay, so we've got 4 more questions. 5.
Thanks to the panelists for a really informative panel on a important topic. So I have 2 questions that are pretty scientific in nature. The comment period it's open for the RFI area only, but it would seem pretty intuitive that the impacts are going outside of that, especially, showing your results, Dr. Drazen, or the expectation that there's a generation of a plume the size of half of Lake Superior every year, right? So you're looking at cumulative impacts that's moving outside the RFI area, most likely into the monument, if not to the islands. And so I'm actually wondering if anybody's actually, you have some really good field-based data, but is anybody actually modeling what the expectation is in terms of that sediment and those toxins moving into those areas. I feel like that would be a pretty easy exercise to do. And then my second question is about other protected species in the area, in particular coral, particularly the 5 species of coral that are threatened in the region, and what impact you think would happen to those species. Thank you.
Okay, so there was issue of plumes and jurisdictions and sort of continuity, and then there was the protected species question, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, there is the potential for adverse effects, particularly over long time horizons, to expand beyond any kind of a management jurisdiction, potentially. In terms of how do we model this, most of the focus has been on modeling the sediment plumes, but the sediment falls out of the water after time, even the clay-sized particles that are really tiny. So no one has actually taken up the modeling of the dissolved metals over time, some of which can get scavenged out of the water column by attaching themselves to particles, and the particles then sink. So that's a more complex modeling task that is required, and I totally agree with you, it needs to be done. So this is part of that first recommendation that I put up there, and trying to understand whether or not metals could actually enter our seafood supply. That's part of that modeling effort that needs to happen. So yeah, really good question. The second part was protected species. Corals, yeah, and the 5 species you're talking about are shallow water corals, correct? I don't suspect, it would take probably a long time of mining before shallow water coastal ecosystems would be affected by deep sea mining. I think it would be first the translation at depth of some of the negative effects of mining. But there are a lot of really ancient corals in the deep sea. Corals in the deep sea can live to 5,000 years. There's a sponge now that has been aged at 8,000 years. These are colonial animals, right? So it's a little different than thinking about our own ages. But those animals take great time, really, really long times to grow, and so those damages need to be considered, not just the shallow water, but protected corals, I would argue. So, seamounts host many of those kinds of animals.
I'll just add that because for the monument, Mariana Trench Monument part of the RFI area or the border, we're just considering the effects to the seafloor. And so even if we think about the pelagic whales, turtles, those that are in the mid waters, and you said they dive deeper to feed. If that ever gets to the island unit, then we start talking about that. But other agencies are looking into effects of those protected species.
All right, we'll finish up with our 4 questions that we had, and then of course the panelists will be available after as well. Go ahead.
Question for Ms. Lauren. Could you please explain to us why the anonymous comments won't be considered?
That is something, I'm not sure why BOEM has decided that. I've seen 2 separate texts from BOEM. One said that BOEM highly discourages anonymous comments. So they discourage you from submitting your comment anonymously. And then I saw a flyer that had the BOEM logo at the top, and it looked like official letterhead. And it said that anonymous comments will not be considered. Why? I don't know. And this is something, I'm not in a federal agency, so yeah, sorry, I can't give you a better answer.
Thank you.
I do wonder, this is just an idea, I wonder if by not having anonymous comments could come from anywhere, anybody, anywhere, and they probably want to hear from you. And so I think by not being anonymous, they're helping to guarantee it's people from the CMI. That's my guess. I don't know.
Good guess.
But you're also able to submit a comment no matter where you live. You don't have to be a CNMI resident to make a comment on the RFI. You could live in Guam, you could live in the States. I think you can even live outside of the States. You just have to be honest with your address.
Okay. Is that on? Yeah, the presentation was really well put out with Lauren, Dr. Drazen, and Dr. McDuff, and so interesting that this young lady back here, where one of your presentations in regards to your RFIs, that emotional comments will be accepted, but you need some clarity. Okay, I would be on this young lady's side. I'm far much a senior. The thing is, yes, it does get very emotional because this impact, whatever's happening, it will affect everybody. Just like Dr. De Leon mentioned earlier. I need to be concerned about my daughter, myself, the community. And you know, with us, it's like, I'm just wondering, who is this company that's trying to be interested in mining these modules down there, that magnesium, gold, zinc, or copper? We have enough problems. When do we stop? You know, the studies is going to continue. Let them study. Let them study, that they can be very sure that we can secure our future for ourselves, and that's okay. And it's true. I'm from here, and I don't want, you know, my turtles to be affected out there. You know, I'm not seeing any turtles tomorrow. It's bad enough. I was just seeing today, snow leopards are going to be out in extinction in what, 10, 20 years. I just don't know when we're going to draw the line, but believe me, I live on a prayer. And I'm glad for the presentation, but it's true, you know, Lauren. Yeah, it can get very emotional, and even my nephew, you know, I sense this feeling about Typhoon U2. You know, I'm in that position too. I did a presentation in college 12 years ago with culinary, trying to get an associate's degree. However, my presentation, for some reason, I started hearing about shark finning. You know, I mean, I'm glad Palau opened up a sanctuary for sharks because they see, and I respect the Palauan culture. They really respect the sea. So these mining companies, what are they going to do with all these modules, whether it's zinc, gold, copper, or silver, or magnesium? Well, you know, I mean, I thought we have enough problems. But, you know, so be it. Let them go on with what they're doing. They're the ones that spending the money, not me. My concern is, whatever they're doing in the future, if it's for the better of everybody, then I'm all for it. Thank you.
My original question about sediment plumes was taken by somebody else, so I'm going to wing this one. We've seen the kind of the outline of the process. I worked for FEMA for a while here doing the U2 response, and so I kind of have an understanding of how federal agencies work and operate, and I'm really scared about, with what I'm seeing here, this request for comment is required by law, but as we've seen and as we've heard, it's not, they don't have to do anything with it. They are required to consider comments, but as we heard at the last meeting, Samoa submitted a lot of comments, universally negative, and the process is still going ahead. So in terms of, it's really important to have our voices be heard now, but what is kind of the long-term process? Is there any oversight, without going into too much about the goals of the current administration, is there any feedback? Is there any observation? Are outside agencies actually looking? Because what typically happens in these situations is they open something for mining or exploitation, work is done, the environmental impacts aren't felt for decades, and then down the line we're all eating fish poisoned with copper and developing cancers, and terrible things are happening, and the people who did that are long gone with their money. So what can we do, or what can we keep doing to make this process, because I don't believe for a second that we can stop this. I don't think that any number of comments will be enough to make them take a second look or pause and do more research, the things that we would like them to do, that would be responsible to do. So what can we do as citizens, and community members in this area that is likely to be affected. And without seeing mud washing up on our beaches, is there anyone that's going to be paying attention and watching for contamination, watching for, you know, elevated metal kind of concentrations in apex predators, for example, that kind of thing? What can we do?
So I think partly what you're getting at is enforcement of the rules. Is that fair summary? Okay. So there's monitoring, and then monitoring can lead to enforcement of rules. If you set up thresholds at which, you know, there's some point at which if some harm is created, mining has to stop. But, you know, that's what I'm talking about, the threshold, those kinds of things. Those kinds of legal frameworks exist in our country for certain industries. Oftentimes, though, the monitoring portion falls to the company that's doing the extractive activity. This happens to a fair extent in the oil and gas industry, for instance. And I suspect because BOEM regulates oil and gas exploitation, they're thinking the same thing for this industry. That's a guess. I am not a policy person. I think everybody here now is very much aware I am an ecologist. So, you know, I don't know that that would be true, but that is my thinking as an ecologist. On the high seas, the International Seabed Authority has a host of regulations for the exploration phase, and they're working on the exploitation phase, the actual mining phase regulations right now. There's a lot of environmental regulation involved in there. Baseline studies must occur. They must occur for years. A mid-water component to that baseline has to exist now. That's new just in the last 5 years. There's a whole host of monitoring that has to continue. And they have to submit reports to the ISA of what those results are. But they are responsible for hiring or conducting those monitoring efforts. Ultimately, at the ISA level, if a company breaks the rules, what happens? What if some country just decides we're not going to listen to you anymore? It's on the high seas. That then falls to policy, sanctions, things like that. You know, people are probably not going to go to war over this. There is no international cop that comes and takes the company leaders away in handcuffs. It's policy actions. So, in terms of what BOEM would do with a company that was breaking the rules, I don't know well enough because I'm an ecologist. But they're valid concerns. Sorry. Yeah, please.
As a Chamorro who's grown up in Guam and has written many comments, I understand your question a lot. But I think what your comment and question is like, it's important, like that's a great example of what to put in the comment. Like, you have these questions, how will this happen? You know, who will be tracking this? Who will be monitoring this? What's the enforcement? What about these problems that might happen? And BOEM, after they review everyone's comments, they will write an analysis and post it on the Federal Register about everyone's comments and concerns and information and interest in the resource. So you can find it for American Samoa. They published it. They published like an analysis of their comments. You can see individual comments. So I encourage you, if this is something you feel strongly about, to put it on the public record. And that gives more grounds. For instance, if there's ever some legal action down the road, you could point to these things that have happened in the federal process. So
I have one other thing to add. This comes from where I'm from, Hawaii. People in Hawaii were also very much concerned that they had no control over deep sea mining because that's going to occur over 3 nautical miles offshore, so it's in the federal purview. So Hawaii passed a ban on deep sea mining, and that's only a ban on mining within 3 nautical miles of shore, but they put in that provision that no vessel interacting in any mining activities can come into port in Hawaii. Hawaii's in the middle of nowhere. So that actually has some teeth. And so, you know, there are creative solutions here, I think. Yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe not solutions, but at least attempts to address.
Thank you all so much for your interest and your questions. I do want to point out the time. So we do have one last question and then the panelists will be here. We also have we have comments. We have 4 people who signed up to comment. And so we'll finish off with one last question, then we'll go to the comment panel.
Man, everyone had very good questions. I might not be here long, so if it's okay, I have a question for each of you guys. And then we'll start with Dr. McDuff to answer, and then the other 2 can, think of their response. So this is for Dr. McDuff. There's a likely possibility, I'm so sorry, my name is Nodino Taiskin and I'm a CNMI resident. There's a likely possibility that the conducted activity can have effect to the monument, which we call a spillover effect. Does that law have any influence in holding these developers accountable? Your management plan includes the National Response Framework, which I did a little bit of research on, in the event of an emergency or a natural disaster in the monument. Nature can be unpredictable at times. Have you guys ever considered the possibility of effects from the proposed development or activity? And do you guys plan to wait till it results to that activity, or does the monument have a contingency plan to prepare this CNMI for these effects? Okay, now for Dr. Drazen. You mentioned sediment plumes being tested with the technologies they have. Do you know what the average decibel of noise pollution is, and if this may affect migration patterns throughout the ocean conveyor belt? Now for Lauren. We're getting close to year 2030. Do you think once these investors start conducting these activities, it might open the chances of hindering the Global's 30 by 30 goal? Okay, thank you.
As far as for the monument, I did throw out language saying that we will protect, conserve habitats, right, and that includes from spillover. This process is new. We're still figuring it out. We're figuring it out how we work with BOEM. So once we get to that point, and this is related to the question that was asked earlier, right? We will get our people. It's not just me. We have a team of experts or contacts throughout the U.S. So, we're gonna. I know we're gonna get all hands on deck whenever that comes. So we'll be working to do that.
So your question was about noise.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I can't give you a number for the decibels because I don't, but there is one in the literature. So the actual sound level of ships and the sound level of some of these vehicles on the seafloor has been measured. I can't quote that. But there is one study that has suggested for the Clarion-Clipperton mining zone between Hawaii and Central America that if 3 operators were going at the same time distributed across that region, that the entire area's background noise level would be above what it naturally is, but not by very much. And obviously the sound is much more intense closer to the activity. So people are trying to study the noise effects, and yeah, I imagine that there would be some animals that would avoid the area where mining was occurring because it's going to be loud right near the ship and right near the lift pipe.
Good job, Neil, with the tough questions at the very end. I like your style. So your question for me was about the 2030 goal. And for those of you that don't know, the UN Convention of Biological Diversity has the Global Biodiversity Framework, and in that there are 22 goals, 23, 22 goals, as well as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which there are 17, and there's targets to achieve by 2030. So affiliated between the two with the UN, with the Global Biodiversity Framework as well as the SDGs, there are conservation targets, and some of that is conserving 30% of all lands and waters by 2030 effectively. And, you know, with deep sea mining in particular, because there's so much we don't know about the true actual impacts, because none of this is happening right now, but we're getting more and more science every day as, you know, as research allows. And if we are smothering our food web, if we are causing drastic changes to our ecosystems, if we are not creating conservation areas in the ocean, then we will be very far from achieving the 20 by 30 goal. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you guys so much.
All right, round of applause. Thank you all so much for our questions. And now we have our commenters. So our first commenter will be Mr. John Gurley. If you have a comment, please go up to the microphone right there. Our next commenter will be Mr. Dean Palacios of DFW. Then we have Auntie Frances Sablon, and then Mr. Jin Coleman of 500 Sales. We'll have 2 minutes per comment. And so please, Mr. Gurley, kick us off.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read it so I don't drift. I'm a 36-year resident of the CNMI and owner of Micronesian Environmental Services, a Saipan-based environmental consulting company formed in 1994. I have a 54-year background in the environmental field, covering the East Coast, Gulf Coast, and Western Pacific region. My formal education is fisheries biology, ecology, and through practical experience, I'm also knowledgeable in environmental and regulatory issues. As a Mariana Islands resident, I have a special interest in how our marine resources are used and harvested, and how the extraction processes can affect other marine resources. As the name implies, this RFI is only in the information gathering phase. Since there is no mining proposal or specific mining activities available to review, I will defer comments on potential impacts to abyssal marine resources until pertinent specific information becomes available. Therefore, my comments will be limited to general conservation measures that could be considered at this early stage planning effort. It is obvious that subsea mining is not sustainable. Neither is other terrestrial mining operations. Mineral mining is necessary for industrial research, industry use, and to support the quality of life for all Americans, even those of us that live in the Marianas. It is expected that permanent ecological impacts will occur with subsea mining. This is no surprise. However, we should be given the opportunity to work with Bowen and the mining companies, possibly under NEPA, in developing conservation measures that will minimize impacts to the marine resources once we know what they are. I have faith that technological advances in this field will be able to minimize impacts to a point whereby they would be generally acceptable to most of the affected Mariana communities. The CNMI has had a long history of unpleasant experiences with the federal government on their takeover of resource management issues in the Mariana Archipelago. From the unilateral designation of the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument to the initial proposed critical habitat rules for the coral and green sea turtle that completely encompassed our coastal infrastructure, including the ocean, wastewater outfalls and harbors, and included the sandy beaches fronting our primary hotels. We found the initial critical habitat proposed rules to be sloppy, with no regard to addressing our quality of life or island culture traditions. In addition, the ESA listing of culturally important wildlife species, for example, giant clams, green sea turtle, and Mariana fruit bat, are all traditional food items for indigenous islanders. I am disappointed that Bowen didn't conduct any face-to-face public meetings addressing the purpose and need for the RFI. With that said, I was pleased to hear that Bowen will be coming out to the Marianas after the comment period is over. The end result of the lack of public outreach is a misunderstanding of the proposed action and the NEPA process. and that BOEM is presently undertaking. Regrettably, this only perpetuates the distrust we have for the federal government. This becomes obvious when reading many of the local newspaper articles and comments submitted from Rhode Island residents. BOEM needs to do a better job in rolling out the subsea mining issue. With respect to Sean's baby, the monument, my favorite. With respect to the adjacent Marianas Trench Marine National Monument, BOEM should consider the potential of mining generated turbidity plumes drifting over into the monument and possibly affecting the benthic habitat. Keeping in mind that the Wardham column is not part of the marine monument, sediment deposition from nearby mining operations could possibly smother living resources within the monument. Two recommendations I was going to throw out is, as a conservation measure, BOEM should consider establishing a 5-mile buffer zone along the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument and RFI boundary where mining would be prohibited. Even though a 5-mile buffer is being presented or recommended, I just pulled it out of the air. It will be important to understand the extent, the magnitude, sediment composition, duration, direction, speed of potential turbidity plumes before finalizing the buffer zone. Depending upon turbidity plume behavior, the buffer zone may need to be increased or decreased. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And up next, I'd like to call out Mr. Dean Colossus. I'm going to make you walk all the way across.
My comment might be short, I guess, because I want to thank you all for this presentation. It was very informative. We had some town halls that were, in my opinion, not very effective. Oh, and then I want to say that I'm Dean Colossus. I am a government employee, but I'm speaking on my own as an individual. Okay. So this is exactly the kind of event that I was hoping that we could hold. Especially Lauren, I really appreciate yours. Because I wanted to come up here and talk about what an effective comment would actually be, which is not just to say we're against it. That has no sway. I mean, it has more than 0, but it's probably like 0.1, okay, on the scale. And so I don't know if you're going to share your slides or anything, but in the Federal Register notice, it tells you what BOEM is interested in. Okay, exactly what was on the slides are cultural fishing, some other things. I have it here in paper, but I don't want to read it. And so that's something I would really like to encourage everybody who can look at that and give a responsive, effective comment, not just a comment saying we are against it. I'm sorry to say this, but this already happened to American Samoa and move forward. Saying we're against it is not going to do anything, okay? If people in Venezuela say, hey, Donald Trump, we're against you invading our country, that doesn't do anything, okay? So let's try to be responsive in an effective way. I hope we can maybe show that again, slides of what exactly they're asking for. I think, I probably have more to say, but I think I'll just leave it at that. Because you guys did a great job. Thank you very
much. And now I'd like to call up Auntie Frances. You may have lost her. She left. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. And now we have Jen Coleman of 500 Sales, and then we have Avery to close up the comment section. All right.
Thank you to the panel. A lot of emotions, of course, running through my veins. Again, I'll just repeat that as a person of the Pacific Ocean, Samoan, Hawaiian, and Chamorro and Carolinian ancestry, the ocean is a part of who we are. And it really wells up inside to share this, that once again, humans trying to go to places they have no business. Exploring is one thing, but to go and extract, it's just like the example in Hawaii. We have this thing, you don't ever take the lava rocks, because what happens later, you find out they melt back the rocks. Well, in this area where very few humans have ever been to, do not assume we know what happens down there, because it's a special, unexplored ecosystem of a unique thing to even, like Sean, being on that expedition. But I look to some of those who have been down there, to these areas. One of them is my brother Cesario, and he is stout against deep sea mining. And the guy that took him down there, Victor Vescovo, is also very firm about not doing this because of not just cultural reasons, but economically, nickel and cobalt is something that they're moving away from using for batteries. There's new technologies. And again, it's a place that should not be, we don't really know what goes down there. When they go down there, they're there for a very limited time, and they're using equipment that is very expensive. The pressure is so great that humans don't belong there, nor should they be taking the machines down there and extracting things for, again, their own convenience. Like our ancestors survived on these islands for 4,000 years, and you know what it was based off of? Respect for the ocean, for the environment, for each other. And so, we don't know what's gonna happen. Samoa is being force-fed, but we maybe have to look at our standing through our covenant, which has been brought up through legal experts. That might be an angle for us to approach, to say that we do have rights to these areas, not just for our future, but even our history, our culture, navigation, all of those things are still dear to our hearts, and it's seated within our blood. It's not something that we just talk about. It's something we feel deeply about. Every single person in here knows our love for the ocean is real. And this morning, attending, sorry, I might have to step out of stop the clock in the morning. But just wanted to say that I was listening in and part of a meeting this morning. It was the National Coral Reef Monitoring Socioeconomic Survey that was done here. And it produced a federal data set that clearly connects our people to the ocean and the deep relationship we have. So we could use that, as I was informed by one of the scientists, as part of our comment, that there's federal data sets that talk about the deep relationship that we have with the ocean. Not just socioeconomic, but the cultural and all of those things. So it's not just, butterflies, cries, and tears. It's something that is a real deep part of our being. That's who we are. And we can't just, like Dr. G said, be helpless. We need to do something about it, speak our voice. Hopefully they hear us. And you guys should research more. I like what Victor Vescovo says about deep sea mining. He's been to every trench. He's been to the Marianas Trench, the Yap Trench, the Palau Trench. And he saw what's down there. And he's saying, leave it alone. It's unexplored. We don't know enough about those ecosystems to be disrupting and strip mining. Again, humans in their error thinking we're gonna somehow advance ourselves. We need to focus on what our natural resources are, not down, 3 miles deep. We have no business there, honestly. And they will be met with a fierce reality, because when you're down at that depth, those machines and all these technologies that they created are not yet tested. So it'll be a waste, and we'll be at the receiving end of all the catastrophes that could be affecting the environment. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gentleman. a master navigator and man of the ocean, so we appreciate your words. And finally, we will hear from the youth, Avery Rakoma, if you would like to come up with our final comment of the evening.
Hello, my name is Avery, and I'm part of Rotaract, and I would also like to share what I think would help make a comment specific is think of like a childhood memory. For me, I'm going to put Manigaha, where you saw, I don't see as much of the blue starfish, or when you go to Bantalan. It used to be a colorful reef, and now it's not. As you go deeper, it's more difficult to monitor these things because you need more specific technology. And then sorry, it's nervous to be up here, but I think that I watched a documentary for my NRM class, and it's called Planet Earth, and you just saw very deep visuals that the land portion, it went from very green to, the narrator mentioned that now there's only 3% of green left, and you can also mention in your comment, in your own way, Planet Earth is one resource that you can quote that we're depleting our resources. And there was another documentary where they did a similar business thing like this, where they were trying to do something for energy, and it poisoned the whole town. Everyone had to move out, and the ground started getting toxic. So one thing that I think people could mention is that long-term consequences for women's fertility and their children, because that was something that I saw in the documentary. That's something that you could use to mention specifically. So instead of saying I'm worried about my family, you could mention fertility also. So I would like to keep my comments short, but thank you for
Thank you, Avery. And now I'd like to call up the Director of Center of Island for Sustainability and Guam Sea Grant, and the man between you and dinner, Dr. Austin Shelton.
Hafide Tantiro, everybody. It's always an honor and a pleasure to, actually a privilege to come up to Saipan and spend some time with you all. I've been really happy to be collaborating with President Galvin and Dean Patty, Kelsey, and the team here at the Northern Marianas College for the past few years. We helped support the start of the CNMI Green Growth Initiative. We started one in Guam in 2020, the Guam Green Growth Initiative, and President Galvin has recently been successful in getting the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to approve Sea Grant for Northern Marianas College, and we're really excited about that, and that's just going to start upon availability of funds, but we hope that that will come soon. Let's give them a round of applause for that. I serve as the director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grant, and it's our mission to help support the transition to a sustainable future for our island region. And this is a really important topic, so that's why we're getting behind this and trying to provide as much support as we can. We reached out to the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program, who connected us with Dr. Drazen, and he graciously agreed to make his way out here to Guam. Lauren was actually our first Guam Green Growth Action Framework Coordinator, and she came back, and I know this guy because we went to grad school together, Dr. McDuff. We were in the same lab. And it really reminds me, actually, one of the overall messages I've been hearing tonight is that we just don't know enough. Right? We were sharing in Guam at our public hearing and our governor's outreach event last night that we know more about the surface of the moon. We have more high resolution maps of that than we have of the deep ocean floor. And it couldn't be more clear than when we were watching Dr. McDuff's presentation and he showed us pictures. What's that? Rock. What's that one? Boulder. Fish. Sea cucumber. We don't know their names. And that's just, it's not because Sean doesn't know. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He's one of the first marine biology PhDs from the CNMI. And so we're really proud of the work that he's doing with the monument over there. But I'm really inspired every time I hear President Galvin speak. So I wanted to tell a quick story too. I got a typhoon story for you. And I don't know if it's going to be as good as his, but so that's one thing that we share. We share the ocean. We're not separated by it between Guam and the CNMI. But my big typhoon that in recent memory was Pongson back in the early 2000s. And I grew up right next to the beach in Asin, Guam. And right after the typhoon, got out of the dark, looked at what the damage was. And what happened was that the beach moved from the back of my house, which is right on the ocean, all the way to the front. So about 50 yards, I had sand piles upon sand piles upon sand piles. And I'm the only boy in the family, so it was my job to figure out how to move the beach back where it belongs. So I went out shovel by shovel, then 5-gallon paint bucket by 5-gallon paint bucket, walking the 75-pound buckets at least, all the way back. Found a cousin with a wheelbarrow, got to borrow that, made more progress. It was really, really hard work. And then, kind people were finishing up their houses. They started helping me. We got, somebody brought a backhoe. We were able to scrape some of it off in day 4. Day 5, the mayor had a chainsaw, so I didn't have to use the machete to whack that ago tree that fell in the front yard over the sand that I couldn't get, so we were able to move that out. So you may think that the point of this story is let's all work together and clean things up. No, my point is be the typhoon. Flood this place with comets. Bring that sand. Every grain of sand is a comet, and we need lots and lots of that. Fill up those buckets, because that's all going to make a difference. And we got all the tips here, right? Make them unique comments. Make them effective comments. Each one of you has a unique perspective and a unique connection to the ocean. And I encourage you also to watch the video of our live stream from last night that Governor Leon Guerrero of Guam did. We had Julian Uggan, Blue Ocean attorney. He's internationally renowned. He's sorry he couldn't make it here today. He had another trip, and so he couldn't follow us to Saipan. But one of the things that he said in his recommendations was, tell them how this is going to injure you, because it's going to injure you somehow. You're not going to be able to enjoy the beach as much as you used to. You're not going to be able to go on the same navigational route. Something's going to change. How is it going to injure you? Because that's the stuff that legal action is made of. So there was a great session on that if you want to get into the legal perspectives. But that's all I wanted to leave you with tonight. Thank you very much for letting me be here and visit Saipan with you. And we share the ocean, but we also share typhoons. So let's be that super typhoon. Amen. And let's get those comments in. So just Maslow.
All right, everybody, one last round of applause for our wonderful panelists. For our very own Dr. Galvin De Leon Guerrero and for Dr. Austin Shelton, who were not separated by an ocean but shared with them. Thank you for your patience and thank you for your interest. And have a wonderful night. Get home safely. We can hold our panelists hostage and keep asking questions.
What's the date on the